I know I teased this episode very strongly and abrasively, and I might have gotten the shock value out there, which is what I was going for, so I hope that brought you in. But I also hope that by the end of this episode you don't think I'm racist, because that's totally not the case. I'm just very curious with kind of the future of where our country is socially. And so that's why I'm glad my next guest kind of put me in check a little bit, and she changed my mind a little bit. I won't say completely, but obviously her points are valid too. But I just hope that, again, you guys don't think I'm racist, because this one can be a little bit of a strong episode, but it's all for the sake of knowledge and curiosity. It was more of me playing the devil's advocate, if anything. So I hope you enjoy. So doing some research for my next guest, you didn't have to look too far for actually finding one of the top African American studies in the nation, and it happens to be in our state. So joining me now, who's actually one of the main people responsible for it, is
Dr. Sharon Austin, Director of the African American Studies Program at the University of Florida.
And if you didn't hear, all you Gator fans, there you go. She's a Gator. So I really didn't know that, Dr. Austin, that UF is one of the top African American studies in the nation.
Right. We actually have more majors than any other department in the nation. Right now, we have approximately 108. We have about 14 students who are graduating in this semester, but we're constantly getting new students in. Okay, perfect.
See, so it's always growing. It keeps going.
Yes,
it keeps going.
Yes.
And so I hope you don't hate me for this. I'm about to start out quick fire, because I teased this episode with my fans that I said that I hate Black History Month. Okay, and I see your face. Look at your face. It's okay. But let me give my reasons why. And it might not be for why you think. And it's actually not the month I hate the most. It's the second month I hate the most. It's actually September that I hate the most, because it's Hispanic Heritage Month. And so for me to elaborate now, I don't like any month that has a distinction because of race or color or ethnicity. I don't understand why that is. I don't understand why it's still a thing. And I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on it. And I hope you don't hate me.
Well, I've heard people say that they hate Black History Month or Hispanic History Month or Women's History Month or Asian Pacific American History Month. And I mean, I've heard various reasons, some of which are reasons similar to what you mentioned, but others are reasons such as we shouldn't just celebrate Black history during one month, because it insinuates that during the 11 months of the year that it shouldn't be talked about. But Black History Month was created as a way to commemorate the accomplishments and the contributions of African Americans in our nation. And the reason for that is because you don't hear about Black history at any other time. Occasionally you might see a movie, like, for example, Hidden Figures, or something that might talk about something of significance in African American history, but you don't really hear people talk about it very much. And as a result, people have no idea about the contributions that African Americans have made. And so that's why Black History Month was put in place. But I mean, I've heard people say that they object to it because we focus on it in that one month, and then you don't hear about it in the other months. And that makes a lot of sense. But I won't say, of course, that I object to it, because I think it's a good idea, simply because at least during that 1 month, it celebrates the accomplishments of this particular group. And with other months like Women's History Month and the others that I mentioned, they, at least during that month, highlight some of the accomplishments. But I just wish, because we live in such a multicultural and multi-ethnic country, that we celebrated diversity every day all year. But unfortunately, it's not like that.
See, so I guess mine is more of like a paradise, if I was thinking if we were living in a paradise. And again, it's because I do love, the African American culture, and I love Hispanic culture. I love all different kinds of cultures.
Right.
And I think they should be celebrated all the time. I don't think, like you said, it should be distinguished to 1 month. And it's the shortest month of the whole year, which is another thing that I don't understand.
Right.
And in my opinion, to me, it's a flex of white power. And I don't know if maybe it's white power per se, but it's a flex of privilege, if I can say that. And so I wanted to also get your thoughts on, you brought up Hidden Figures, and I also wanted to talk about the 13th. Why do you think everything is kind of so hidden? I mean, it kind of takes a little longer for things to come to light.
Right. Well, a lot of it is because even people within the black community are unaware of the contributions of the many things that our people have done. And because I just think that people just do not really acknowledge the contributions of people of color in our society. Those accomplishments aren't really celebrated in the way that they should be. And then also just in schools, this type of information is not taught. For example, I remember even when I was a student in elementary school, the only thing that we learned about that pertained to African Americans was slavery and Martin Luther King, or maybe Rosa Parks. But it's almost as if there was no other African American history. And so I think that's one of the reasons why, African American History Month is something that that is something that I celebrate, simply because if it were not for this one month, my fear is we wouldn't hear about the accomplishments of our people at all. But a lot of it is because just our society just refuses to talk about the past. We feel very uncomfortable talking about our past simply because there's so many ugly things that happened in the past that we don't feel comfortable talking about.
But we need to shed light on those things, right? I mean, it is ugly to talk about. It's horrible, the atrocities that went down. But we need to talk about them to make sure they don't come back again.
Exactly.
And we're living in a very tumultuous time. And do you kind of see similarities between kind of the old times and kind of now?
Well, I won't say I see similarities because, I mean, despite the prejudices and things that we witness in today's society, it's not nearly as bad as the types of things that maybe my parents or grandparents or great grandparents had to deal with. But I do see some troubling things happening across the nation, and I think a lot of people would blame that on a lot of different things. But I think that for some reason people are a lot more, they're bolder. They're more willing to openly show hateful things. And I think also just the internet has a lot to do with it, social media, because you're able to sometimes type things anonymously and you can just say all kinds of things and no one's going to know who you are. And so it's not so much that people have views now that are worse than they were in the past. It's just that now they're able to express those views anonymously.
Right, they can hide behind that shroud.
Hide behind the computer. Right,
and then you're not putting your name onto what you're saying. It's just they spewed this hateful words and phrases, and there's no accountability.
Exactly.
But also, so I wanted to touch upon kind of the Black Lives Matter movement and kind of where it's at today. A lot of people argue that it's not helping. Mm-hmm. A lot of people argue it does help.
Right.
Where do you kind of stand on the whole Black Lives Matter movement?
I think that it is helping in the sense a lot of people are misinformed as to what the movement is really about. And a lot of that I think is because of media bias. The media tends to show Black Lives Matter activists when they're loud and they're angry and they're obstructing things without really explaining why they're there and what the movement is all about. The movement is about, of course, Black Lives Mattering because, and that's what the focus of it, simply because whether we want to admit it or not, there are disparities in the sense that if a white police officer or if someone kills a black person, they're a lot less likely to be punished than if they kill someone of any other race, especially if it's a case in which a white person is hurt or a white person is killed. Usually the person is more likely to be punished. And
usually it doesn't even escalate that far.
Right, and usually it doesn't even get media attention. For example, if a black person is murdered, I mean, you hear about things like Trayvon Martin or Michael Brown, and they get a lot of media attention, but you don't hear about the things that are happening in communities every day that we don't really hear about. So in that sense, Black Lives Matter is important because it at least brings attention to a problem that in our society that we don't want to acknowledge. But I guess if I had one critique or one criticism of the movement, I think that they should focus more so on black crime as well. Because, for example, when you think about what's happening in the city of Chicago with the gang violence, I mean, gang violence everywhere, but especially in Chicago with the murder rate, most of it being black on black, most of it being in black inner city communities, those are things in the black community that we don't talk about nearly as much as we should. So if I had one critique of the movement, it would be, I would tell them that I respect what you're doing and I agree wholeheartedly with what you're doing, but I think we also need to look at things that are happening in our own neighborhoods, and when black people are attacking other black people, we should show the same level of anger in those situations that we do when a white police officer, for example, attacks someone who's black.
So do you think people are kind of afraid to bring that up because then, the people that are like, oh, the Black Lives Matter movement doesn't matter, or they kind of point to that, like, hey, there's more black on black crime, or,
right.
Or they say, like, it's not only white officers killing black people.
Right. It is a way that people use to sort of dismiss the movement. Now, the movement itself is very important, and they're doing a lot of things, not so much even just necessarily to focus on the importance of black lives, but also to look at other issues as well with other communities. But it is a way that people have dismissed it, because the argument is, well, you know, there's black on black crime, and I guess most black victims of crime are victimized by people of their own race, and that's something that we don't really like to talk about. But that still doesn't erase the fact that there is a problem that the Black Lives Movement is focusing on that needs to be focused on.
And a lot of this stems, I want to touch back to the 13th Amendment and kind of the 13th documentary, how they sneakily threw in a little loophole clause in the 13th Amendment, which, you know, grants freedom to every citizen of the U.S. Unless you're incarcerated or in prison for punishment. Right. And so your thoughts on that? I mean, how did that kind of come about? Why is that in there?
Yeah, I think, I'm thinking about felon disfranchisement, which I've talked about in some of my political science classes, which means in a lot of places, once a person commits a felony or serves time, that person loses his or her suffrage rights, his or her right to vote. And in some communities, they've made a change and they've allowed people who've been convicted to later regain those voting rights. But the problem is, once you're alienated from the system, usually you don't want to participate in it. So in other words, once you are convicted and once you lose your voting rights, you don't want to vote again, because you just don't think it really it's useless. You really don't think that it makes very much good. But I mean, I guess that was put there as a way to make sure that citizens understood the importance and value of citizenship and respected citizenship, so that you would know that if you committed any type of crime, and if you were convicted of any type of crime, that you would lose your rights, your suffrage rights, and other rights. So I guess it sounds like it's something that is fair, but really when you look at the way that it's been used over the years, it has resulted in the disfranchisement of a number of people of color, in particular men of color, and in particular African American men.
So this is one of those, it was meant for good intentions, and obviously the evil people get a hold of it, and
but
they use it to their benefit.
People who defend it would argue that, well, if you don't want to lose your voting rights, don't commit a crime. And yeah, of course that makes sense, but
easier said than done when you have a family of 4 who's very hungry, you know. And unfortunately that's a lot of the cases in a lot of the black communities that are very much ignored and very much not taken care of, you know. And I also wanted to talk about you were talking about disenfranchised felons, and kind of how 1 in 3 felons are African American, and 60% of all felons are actually of color. And so why is there such a disparity between the races in terms of prison, and what can we do to, like you said, make them better, rehabilitate them, make them better members of society, not, okay, you're a felon, we shun you, you lose all your rights, you're alone, we isolate them essentially.
Well, I mean, that's a really complicated question. The main thing would be to make sure that people are not living in poor communities where they don't have an opportunity for an education, and they don't have opportunities that many of us take for granted. That's the best way to make it so that children won't grow up to be felons, to provide their communities with good schools and housing opportunities and other types of opportunities. So I would say that probably is the obvious thing, to focus on and to emphasize education among young people and make communities safer. But the question is, how do you do that? Because I mean, that sounds good, but those are problems that our society has had for many years, and how do you address those problems is the main question.
So you're saying, instead of helping the felons once they're already felons, don't make felons.
No, I'm not
don't
saying.
Don't make criminals. But it's a great point. It's saying start from the ground. You work with the seed to make a beautiful tree. You know, you don't want to cut down a tree and be like, okay, let's plant you again. It's one of those where you're valuing more the education and the growing up of education.
Provide young people with opportunities in every community is the main thing. But also, once a person has committed a felony, make sure that you have rehabilitation programs in place, and also make it so that if and when that person is eventually released into society, that person then can take advantage of educational and job training programs.
So back again to the 13th Amendment and that clause. A lot of that clause was used during the civil rights movement. They used it in the war on drugs, and that was a really big thing. in today's day and age, I kind of don't feel we should, still have that war on drugs, because it does kind of label certain people that, again, it's a human person. They can do what they want, whether you like it or not. That's completely different. But do you feel that they were using the clause and the war on drugs to kind of silence the civil rights movement?
Well, I don't know if I would say that, and I don't know if I would even agree with the comment you made about us not needing a war on drugs. I think the war on drugs, especially if you think about the war on drugs during the 1980s, when the crack epidemic first surfaced in urban cities, and then continuing into the 1990s, it was something that was necessary, because in one of my classes in urban politics, we talk about New York City and the fact that during the 1980s, the crack epidemic was just really destroying the entire city, and tourists were afraid to go there to visit. So they had to do something, but the problem is comes with the types of tactics that were used, like the racial profiling and the directs and patrols and the stop and frisk. Those types of tactics, in some ways, some people would argue that they were successful, but I guess you have to ask the question, were they successful but at too great a cost? Because on one hand, you're going into minority communities where the drug problems appear to be the greatest, most significant problems in those communities, but you can't just stop and frisk people on the street, because in doing that, you might find people who are guilty of selling drugs or distributing drugs, but you're also alienating the members of that community, and they already have tense relationships with the police anyway, and you're also making it so that you're stopping and frisking innocent people in many situations who haven't done anything wrong. And in some situations, especially during the 1990s, I'm thinking about in New York City with Amadou Diallo was an immigrant who had just recently moved to this country, and he just happened to be in his apartment building, and he just happened to be coming downstairs, and the police were doing some type of stop and search operation, and they happened to see him, and yet the police are giving one side of the story, but he's giving another. But in the end, he ended up getting shot 41 times in 56 seconds. And so in that situation, that's an example of stop and frisk gone wrong. I mean, in a way, you could argue that, the tactics are working, but are they working? Is it worth it when you have a situation like this, where you have a man who's completely innocent, who just happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time? And you saw many, many incidents like that in the past, and also in the present as well.
So do you think, speaking of the present, militarizing the police has kind of been the worst move that there can be in terms of your community, because it isolates them, doesn't it?
Right. In some ways it does. And in one of my classes, we read some articles about the militarization of the police. It alienates the community, and then studies have shown that it oftentimes is not all that successful in bringing down the crime rate. So that is one tactic that's not considered to be a very popular one.
I mean, when you kind of section them off, you give them AK or automatic machine guns, and they have these bulletproof vests. It's scary. I walk into Publix and I see a police officer with a bulletproof vest on, and I'm like, oh my goodness, what's going on here? I'm just trying to get groceries. Right. But back to just kind of like the whole civil rights movement and everything. Again, we're in a very, very heated time in history, and I want to kind of like jump back. How can we learn from our history so that now we don't suffer those same mistakes, even though it seems like we keep falling back into our old ways?
Right. I think the one thing that a lot of Americans need to be aware of is our history of our relationships with immigrants. I teach an Asian American politics class, and we talk about Japanese internment during World War II, when there was a situation. Of course, there was the attack on Pearl Harbor, and there was a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety and a lot of hysteria, and a lot of that was directed at Japanese citizens. And so you had a situation in which people were living on the West Coast, and they were told that they were living in military zones, and that they had the option either of moving or going into these internment centers for their own protection. And thousands of people did. And so for over 3.5 years, about 120,000 Japanese Americans and immigrants lived in these internment centers. And so that's a situation, when I think about the attitudes that we have toward Muslim immigrants and the type of anxiety and fear that we have, especially in the post 9/11 era, it's kind of frightening, because it makes you wonder in today's society, if we had another attack that was similar to what happened on September 11th, would Americans be in support of seeing immigrants be placed in internment centers. And it's kind of scary to think that a lot of Americans probably would.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we do need to learn from our history, and that's why it's important for people to understand Japanese internment. But I would assume probably that the overwhelming majority of Americans, I notice even in my classes, a lot of students have never heard of it. They're completely unaware of it. So it's important to understand your history so that you won't, repeat the same mistakes of the past.
Dr. Austin, I know this is a hard question, and it probably doesn't have an answer, really, but where does racism stem from? Where does it originate? Because it's something that I really don't understand. It's something that, to me, it's mind-boggling that it still exists in 2017, and it's so prevalent.
Right.
And like you said, I feel like with the internet, it's kind of made a bounce back because, like you said, it's that cloud, that anonymity that you can kind of use as cover. But why is it still around?
Why is racism still around? I think a lot of it is just people are insecure. And you have a situation in which people have to feel like that they have to sort of subjugate someone else or some other group in order to make themselves feel superior. And so a lot of it is just people's ignorance. A lot of it is people's just insecurities.
Would you call it a form of brainwashing?
I would say it's a form of brainwashing because people who are racist really do believe that they're superior. But the problem with racism in today's society, as opposed to in the past, is that in the past, people were really open and they were blatant when they showed their racism. But in today's society, a lot of people are racist, but they don't think that they are. And it's the subtle type of racism that you have to deal with that's really almost impossible to prove, and the institutional racism that exists in our society.
Yeah, and there's something that you hit on it. There's minimal racism. People aren't like boasting and open about it, but you still have the traces all the time.
Right. It's unfortunate.
It's very unfortunate. Very unfortunate. Again, it's something that I just don't understand. How in today's society, we've gone to Mars and all this stuff, and we still have racism today. But again, sorry. So sidetrack. So I wanted to talk about. I'm a very avid rap fan. I love rap, and there's this whole movement in the rap community and in rap and hip hop where they use nigga a lot. They use that word all the time. So I was wondering, I'm sorry you gave me a face, but I was just wondering how you feel towards that word, and if you think it's actually helping like rappers say it does, because they're saying that it means brother and friend and everything. I like Tupac's definition of it: never ignorant, getting goals accomplished. But again, that's Tupac who said it. So again, just your thoughts.
I mean, I don't know very much about rap, and I don't listen to it. But as far as
in terms of the
word itself and the use of the word, I don't listen to the song, so I don't know the context of the word. But I just think the word is ignorant, and I just think if you have real talent, that you ought to be able to express your message without using not only the N word or those types of words, but also misogyny as well. So I mean, I'm sure they have the right to use the word as artists. They have a right to use their artistic freedom. But I just think that anyone who uses that word is just ignorant, and it just means that you must not have very much talent, because if you did, you could find a better way to express yourself.
And it's also kind of the way they appear too, with the low sagging pants,
yes,
and
exactly,
and the drugs and
exactly.
everything. Yeah, I definitely understand that. So switch gears now, completely switch gears. So what is African American studies in terms of what does it actually entail?
It is interdisciplinary, and it talks about the contributions of African Americans historically, politically, socially, not only in American society but worldwide. So that's, I guess, a brief definition of what it is.
Oh, so it covers all.
It covers not only in the United States but in the entire Africa diaspora and the entire world.
Okay, and it's more. Is it more of like a history? So it's like a history of everything that kind of has led to where we are today.
Yes, many of our courses are historical in nature. Some of them aren't, but it encompasses a number of different fields. For example, my field is political science, history, literature and English, the arts, communications, philosophy. It encompasses all of the contributions of African Americans in different interdisciplinary fields.
Okay, and so with that, what can you kind of do with that out of college?
Well, the thing that we emphasize is the fact that they learn skills. For example, many of our classes heavily emphasize writing, and as far as our alumni over the years, I would say the majority of them have gone to graduate or law programs, and because it's interdisciplinary, we equip them with writing skills. For example, many of our students are now law students. Many of them have gone into PhD programs. A significant number of them plan to go into teaching, especially at the college level. So we prepare them for the ability to apply to some of the best graduate programs in the country. Many of them have pursued a variety of careers. Some of them have been in community activism. Many of them have worked for nonprofit organizations. Many of them have worked for the government. So with African American Studies, or with just a liberal arts degree just in general, all of them provide students with various types of skills that they could use to pursue a variety of careers.
Those are everyday skills.
Right.
That's important.
Right.
Those
We
are
like
all
to think
important.
that when our students graduate, that they're among the best writers in the nation, and as a result of that, they're able to really get good placements in graduate schools or in careers. And also, we have an internship program, and at the University of Florida, they have a really good career resource center that provides our students with internships, so that they, regardless of what their major is, they can decide exactly what they want to do. They can do an internship while in college, and then when they graduate, possibly get a full-time position with the place where they interned.
And is African American Studies strictly for African Americans?
No.
Okay.
No, it's as a matter of fact, in our courses, I would say probably the majority of students who take our courses are not African American.
Wow.
And as far as in our major, the majority of students are probably African American, but I would say probably about 85% of them are. But we also have students, I'd say about 10% are Hispanic Latino, and probably about 5% or less are Asian American and white.
Very cool. So it's very diverse.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, our classes especially are very diverse. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things that's surprising to people. For example, when I teach African American politics, and people come into the class and they see that the majority of the students in class are white. There are 50 students, and probably I'd say 10 or less are black, and so people are really surprised to see that. So African American Studies is something that, that everybody can learn something from, and the students take the classes because they find them to be interesting, and they tend to really like our professors. But then once they take one class, they then want to take additional ones, and that's how we're able to recruit students into our classes and into our major.
That's beautiful, and like you said, it gives everybody kind of their writing skills up,
Right.
and it's all encompassing in terms of just
Right.
everyday skills.
And they also get to discuss a lot of social issues, even like some of the questions that you've asked me, or some of the questions that we discuss in my classes. And so you get to talk to students from different backgrounds who you probably wouldn't otherwise meet on campus in class, and have those types of discussions, and the students learn from that.
So, have you ever had a very heated class?
All the time.
Have you?
We
ever
all
had...
do. All
yes, all the time.
Yeah,
Okay.
especially since this was just recently in the election year with President Trump.
I haven't even brought him up. I don't
Anything
know. I'm not
pertaining
going to
to
bring him
President
up.
Trump.
Yeah, I'm not even going to bring him up. There's a lot more people can talk about him. I don't want to talk about him. But I'm very curious. Again, so you said it's kind of like a wide range of people. So have you had a racist before in the classroom?
Well, since I've been here at the University of Florida, I've not had anyone who has been openly racist. But I have had students who've had views that sounded racist. And before I came here, I was at another university, and I did have a situation once. We were talking about, this was a law class, and we were talking about a case, and we described the plaintiff. I think in the case she was described as being uneducated and poor, and so one of the students was presenting. And so I asked him, I said, well, why do you think that she was described in this way? And he said, was she black? And so, and I was like, what?
Whoa.
But I have had situations in which people have said things, but usually people are not bold enough to say things openly in front of an African-American professor. But sometimes, when you read your evaluations, that's when students really tell you what they really think of you. But that's something that we all deal with.
Yeah,
so.
it's all the time. Yeah, you must be looking at me like, oh my goodness, this kid, why is he here? Can't wait till this interview's over.
No.
I'm just kidding. So how did you kind of get to be director of the African American Studies program here?
I've been teaching here at UF since 2001, and before I was teaching here, I was teaching for a year at the University of Michigan, and then at the University of Missouri, Columbia, and the University of Louisville. So I've been working in Black Studies departments for many years, beginning in 1992 at the University of Louisville when I was in Pan-African Studies there. And then I've been studying and writing about African American studies and African American politics for many years. So in 2011, when there was an opening and there was a need for an interim director, I was asked to serve as interim director because I had been working with the program and people knew who I was. And then I was tenured, and I really wanted to do it because of my background. And then a year later, there was an opportunity for a permanent position that I applied for, and I was able to compete for and get.
Wow. Okay. Wow. So it takes a long time. It's a long journey.
Right. So it's something I really enjoy.
Yeah, that's great. And to close out, I'm very curious. What do you see the next 4 years of our nation? How do you see? What do you see as our future?
I think in America, our future is always bright because regardless of what we have to deal with, we always find ways to overcome whatever obstacles or problems we have in our country. So the future is going to be bright. But I am troubled by some of the outright examples of racism that I'm seeing in American society, and the fact that we have so much diversity that we should really benefit from, but yet so many people are so busy fighting with each other that they're not coming together. So, I mean, over the next 4 years, I really would hope that we would sort of put our differences aside and look at the problems that we have in our society and really come together across classes, across races, across ethnicities, men and women, to try to address those issues.
Wow, spoken like a true director. Wow, that was perfect. I couldn't have said it better myself. But I agree. I think compromise is the number one thing that we kind of need to come together in the country.
Right, exactly.
We're very divided, and we just need to understand we're all American.
Right, exactly.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Director. I don't want to take up any more of your time.
Oh, no problem.
Thank you so much.
All right, and thank you for coming.
See, it wasn't so bad. Like I said, I was just playing more devil's advocate. It's for the sake of knowledge, for the knowledge. And I know also what you must be thinking is, holy crap, how did he go a whole podcast without talking about Donald Trump? I mean, I brought him up a little bit, but I didn't go fully into it. But that's because I really just didn't want to, because you guys already get so much spewed at you about Mr. President. So I thought this could be a nice little getaway. You can get some more knowledge without having that whole political debate. So that's why I kind of avoided Trump at all costs. But again, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Let me know what you guys think. My next guest is going to be really interesting because I'm going back to the news route. I already interviewed the kind of the behind the scenes puppet master, as if you guys remember the analogy. So now I thought it would be better to do the people who are in front of the camera. So that's who I just gave you a little hint of who the next guest is. Also, shameless plug here. I hope you guys enjoyed also the intro and the outro song. My boys killed it with the song. They're called Imbue. Also, the title of their latest vinyl is called Imbue. You can check the show notes to kind of see where to get it. It's vinyl only, which is also super awesome because they're all about the sound quality, which is how it should be. So that's why it sounds so crisp. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed that, and shout out to them. And so again, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and find your passion, pursue it, and peace.